Dave Rubin seems to be still on this sort of like Law and Order kick. You know, he was explaining to people the other day about the differences between first and second and third degree murder, and had a theory about why Chauvin was going to be charged with third degree murder. But now he's moved over to Law and Order SVU, I guess. And here he is opining about Kermit the Frog and Miss Piggy.
Well, what about Miss Piggy? Because Miss Piggy was basically sexually accosting and physically abusing Kermit the Frog all the time, right? Kermit wasn't really into Piggy. Piggy was beating the crap out of him. She beat the crap out of a lot of people. You know, I'm pretty sure she raped him at some point. Like, there was definitely something going down there. We didn't see it all on air, but like, you know, they've got to come for everything.
Except they're not coming for that. You made that up.
It's right.
It's all he can handle. But to be fair, I would rather have Dave Rubin talk about these things than to sneak into, murder trials. That would be appropriate. Like, stick with that audience.
The left doesn't want you to watch. Go ahead, brother. I was just saying the left doesn't want you to watch Johnny Bravo anymore because of the way he propositions women.
You know, I'll tell you something. I watched with Saul Ghostbusters, the original. You know, we got to go through every movie that is in every series, and you got to start at the one first, and then have the second, and then the third. And
just like the Marvel movies, that's
exactly
that's what he needs.
But Ghostbusters was one of the and Ghostbusters was I think I was a little bit older when that was made, but when I was a teenager, the comedies that were made are to revisit them now, we're so horrific in this way. It's stunning. And even Ghostbusters, which I had first of all,
how about 16 Candles when like the blonde
Porky's,
kid tries to rape that girl.
All of it is just horrific to watch now. And Ghostbusters, Bill Murray is super rapey in it. Attitudinally towards the lead woman. Women in that movie are represented. There is a scene where the city is being attacked by all these ghosts, and the mayor's freaking out, and he's assembled his entire sort of administration in his office. The Ghostbusters come in, and you look around, you look at those like 12 people in that office, and you realize they're all men. They're all men. And except for the fourth Ghostbuster, they're all white men.
Which isn't what the city was like back then, to be fair. Like, the administrations weren't even like that.
Without a doubt. It's just stunning that I think like the amount of, it is extreme. I think it's just telling as to like, and this is, look, I watched this movie when I was in my teens. I don't remember when it came out, but I was certainly in my teens. And the bottom line is like, this is what we're seeing today is a function of that. Is people, men, white men, predominantly, watching these, growing up on these movies, growing up in this culture and saying like, what happened? If there's not 12 white guys in this office and there's now like maybe some black guys or maybe some brown guys and maybe some white and brown and black women in there, there's less slots for me. I've lost.
Well, that was insane.
My measure of mediocrity is not going to get me in that room anymore. Now I got to be that much. I got to be in the top 4 of the 12 guys instead of being like number 8 or 10 or 11.
That was that insane reaction to the female Ghostbusters movie too, though. Right. Sam, do you remember that? Like, that movie wasn't that good. I saw it, but before it even came out, it's just anyway. Just that's a good example for that reason, because people went nuts when like the Kristen Wiig.
That's what this is
Leslie
all about,
Jones
though,
one.
is that now they're making those movies. Society has changed. It hasn't gotten to where it should be yet, but it's changed. But to look back at where it was just, 40 years ago,
and like
is nuts.
And when there are really inappropriate books, that, that publishers decide to take off the market because children are being indoctrinated by watching and reading these things. I mean, there's a way of preserving film and recognizing it for its historical context. And also, like, look at Mad Men. I mean, I know, Emma, you've been watching Mad Men, right?
I haven't been tweeting about it.
Not at all. It's an illustration of that time. I mean, there are few people of color in it. I haven't seen it in 10 years, so I can't remember. But it was an illustration. And so when you're watching, you're like, oh my God, this is horrifying. This was, my grandfather worked in that building. Like, 3 martini lunch. Like, this is what they used to do. It's a different way of interpreting it. And so, like,
well, it condemns it. It's a feminist show, and now there are Black characters in season 5 as the office gets integrated. But yes, it's like it's about how racist and sexist these men are, right?
But like, for these guys, it's not just that they're being challenged with the reinventions of these movies and the cancellations. Their identities are being challenged. It's like going to a therapist. It's being like forced to go into conversion therapy and converting into like being a wholesome, empathetic progressive, essentially. I mean, those are the breakdowns I see.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing like the this sort of I contend that's a big part of what we're seeing. And Donald Trump sort of like said, "Wait a second, I can turn the clocks back a little bit," and Barack Obama was like, basically showing people how, was basically like female Ghostbusters. Like, we're gonna, you rubbing it in our face. Well, no, we're just actually just existing in a world that probably the way the world should be. And it just feels like it's being rubbed in your face. And that's really a function of your defensiveness. I mean, it's stunning.
But how do you prevent the violent outbursts, violent reactions to that? I mean, that I think ultimately is what the Biden administration is really struggling with, is we are going to progress as a society. Hollywood is going to be, hopefully, a little bit, as they showed in the Oscars nominations. But the reaction is so violent. And I mean, Emma and I know what we see on Twitter against women, even on our side. It's so incredibly violent. What's to be done about it other than, breaking up these platforms?
Oh, well, I mean, I wouldn't break up the platforms for that because it's not going to change it. I think it's basically going to be
racist and sexist designed algorithms. I think.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. No, that is a separate, but that's a separate, that to me is they're just trying to get engagement. What needs to be done, I mean, I think is you try and contain the violence as much as you can. I mean, I think there are things that can mitigate it a little bit, but ultimately the big change is going to come about when more old people like me die. Honestly, like that, it's going to be time. I mean, that's the way.
Maybe, but Dave Rubin exists and Ben Shapiro exists.
Yeah, but oh no, you're not going to eradicate it. But his audience is going to get smaller and smaller, and their audiences are going to get smaller and smaller, and the appetite for this is going to get smaller and smaller. It's going to get more and more intense as it gets smaller and smaller because it's a Masada type of complex.
I do think it's manifesting in a new form with younger people, though, in a different way than you're saying, Sam, with like, I mean, Ben Shapiro's audience is fairly young, I would imagine.
I
agree. But I think Ben Shapiro's audience is like, I mean, if Ben Shapiro existed, if there was somehow to make him exist 40 years ago, his audience would be a fraction of people who feel this way. Now, I think his audience there's a lot of people who feel that way. Like he represents a bigger portion of those people. In other words, yes, Ben Shapiro is going to exist, but if you take his audience, even if it's 1 million people, Steven Crowder gets 3 million, viewers, it's still significantly less than what it would have been 20 years ago and 30 years ago. Yeah. And the appetite for it is becoming less, and it's indicative of just sort of like, it's the same thing with cancel culture, right? I mean, like, it's just like, it has changed. It's not, we're not there yet.
I think it's manifested more than maybe you think. I think it's taken on different forms, and it might be more like persistent and pernicious than just a generational thing. it's internalized misogyny and
Right.
and racism and.
I agree.
You know,
and I'm not even saying that the intensity is necessarily less, but the numbers are less. They just are. Otherwise, there wouldn't be, you wouldn't, women would still be considered chattel.
But it's
when
not
they get
going
married.
down. I think it's like, yes, okay, so the numbers are less, but it's peaked again. Like it's rising, and then there's a limit. There's a limit.
There's a white knuckle effect. The as it slips, as you lose this status, you get more angry about it, and you don't have to just simply rely on the mechanisms of society to take care of it for you.
Well, and the people that
Now you have
aren't
to
as
get
angry are
engaged.
self-sorting out, so it's radicalizing in that sense too.
Yeah, I think so. That doesn't necessarily mean the intensity, like, but they wouldn't have to say this stuff before because it was just everybody understood it. It's just the way that society operated. And now it's like and so I'm not saying that I think the violence is or the intensity of it is going to go down. It may actually continue to go up as there's less actual people who agree with this attitude. The more you're going to get a more intense crowd of people who are going to be doing more desperate things, I think, to try and maintain that status and that power.
I don't want us to overlook the fact that at one point in this video, Dave Rubin refers to Miss Piggy and Kermit the Frog as not seeing what happens off screen, as though they are living things and not puppets.
Well, right. That's very confusing for him because they talk.
Can I just, I also, okay. Brendan, you're going to say?
I just said I know. It is confusing.
So I'm on YouGov, and as far as the Ben Shapiro show, most popular with baby boomers, 27%, 20% Generation X, and 25% millennials. So that's kind of the breakdown there.
I think it's like maybe like the Beliebers, they'll all age out, right? You know, it's like what happens with every teen pop sensation. I mean, I think Ben Shapiro's lost a little bit of a step even recently, and like how teen pop stars, they have fans, or the One Direction fans, and then they all grow up out of their 14-year-old selves, and that's the equivalent to what
his voice is,
his voice is changing. The audience in itself is like so much smaller than like Rush Limbaugh's audience. So in that sense, like Sam, you're right. Fox's views are going down. They're all over the place with their messaging. It's clearly, a 65 plus audience. I don't know what OWN is and Newsmax, but I'm sure it's like
undoubtedly
nothing.
Yep.
So the reality is the landscape is absolutely smaller. And if they're cracking down on Q sites, I mean, maybe it'll fizzle out, but I think it's about the concentration, right? Like how concentrated is the extremism, and is that concentration continuing to grow even though they're playing whack-a-mole with these sites?
Yeah, I mean, but I think that these feelings of misogyny and racism exist outside of these social media. I think they get the social media may help generate some of it, but I mean, I think it exists.
Look at the anti-maskers. It's the anti-maskers. I mean, They can play a big role. I mean, maybe the identity didn't come. Maybe somebody becomes the anti-masker from a friend of theirs, but doesn't read the QAnon site, but it's facilitated there.
Oh, without a doubt. I guess my argument is just that this misogyny and racism has been there. It is just more, obvious to us at this moment than it was, let's say, 20 years ago, maybe, because there are actual changes. They're actually, like, the misogynist and the racist worldview is under more threat now than it was then. And so the intensity grows. And I think that's what we're seeing. Like, there is an inverse sort of relationship between the numbers of people and the intensity of their feelings.